welcome everyone. How are you? Great. So glad to see you all here in Medellin. So welcome to our session on building a thriving ecosystem for social change. Um, I am Lynette Rawlings, the founder and CEO of the Policy Academy, is a nonprofit that works to shape a fair, just, and fully inclusive society by mainly training the new leaders of our policy sphere. And today we have with us Dr. Michael McAfee. He is the president and CEO of PolicyLink, a national research and action institute that is working to build a future where all people in the United States of America can participate in a flourishing, multiracial democracy, prosper in an equitable economy, and live in thriving communities. Um, some of those goals are to build sort of responsible and accountable governing systems and structures, all people having good jobs, dignified and rising standards of living, increasing voice, power, and ownership, and all folks having a choice of where they live to find belonging and prosperity. We also have Nathaniel Smith. He is the founder and chief equity officer of the Atlanta based Partnership for Southern Equity. He is a proud child of Southern freedom movement activists. Nathaniel works to advance racial equity through an equity agenda which advances just outcomes that are sensitive to the needs and circumstances of communities, erasing barriers that stand in the way of success, and creating conditions that enable fair and just and fair inclusion in a society in which all people can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. So, with goals like that and the time that we are living in, this should be an interesting conversation. Um, so, we'll start with a broader framing of can each of you share a bit about your work, your approach to your work, and your leadership, and what your organizations have been working to build, I will say, prior to the cataclysm that we recently faced? I'll start with you.
Well, it's definitely an honor to be here. Good morning, everyone. I always say that and actually a great man said this, anything below the Canadian border is the South. So we're all Southerners. And for my people from the global South, thank you for having us here. It is a beautiful, beautiful opportunity for us to come together as one. And anytime there's an opportunity for me to be a part of that, I'm here. So for us, it's simple. At the Partnership for Southern Equity, we believe that all people are beautiful and precious, and that unfortunately, in the U.S. in particular, but I'm sure from a global perspective, we can say this as well, that we are dealing with the bankruptcy of empathy. We are dealing in a time, and we've always been dealing with this, unfortunately, that fear and greed have taken a front seat as relates to how resources are distributed and how people are valued. And for us at the Partnership for Southern Equity, we believe that the only way to solve this problem is if we can realize collectively what Dr. King called the values revolution. That we must begin first and not only in the place where the first hold of white oppression was dug, and that is the American South. That we must begin to work collectively to ensure that we're not only transforming policies, but also people in ways that will facilitate the type of changes that we want in community. And as an organization, of course, when you're focusing on the liberation of Black people and historically disinvested communities, there are many, many points of entry that we can take to begin to fight that fight. And for us, there are four primary areas that we fight, and that is through our climate justice work, our economic inclusion work, our health equity work, and our equitable growth and development work. We also have a youth power building arm because we believe that if we're as more seasoned leaders not working our way out of a job, then we're not doing work at all, real work at all. So we have to engage young people. And for us, it's really also about, how can we begin the process of either supporting good delivery systems that play a role in providing the opportunities and the resources that our vulnerable communities need, or disrupting them and replacing them in ways that will facilitate the type of community that we need. And the last thing that I will say is there's a saying that many of the elders that I grew up around used to say, and that is that there's nothing new under the sun. And for us at the Partnership for Southern Equity, we believe that we are just a part of a long relay marathon, and it's just our time to hold the baton, a relay race of liberation, of the work that is required for all of us to be free. And we just feel like as an organization that if we're not pitching our tent, so to speak, in the place where it all began in the U.S., and that is, of course, the American South, then we will continue to play around and run around in circles, trying to figure out ways to get over this thing. And we have to figure that out. And as an organization, we partner with great organizations like Policy Link to do whatever we can to show up for these critical moments. And this is a very critical moment now, and I'm sure we'll talk about that soon.
Thank you, brother. Good morning. So Policy Link is a research and action organization. It helped to put the notion of equity, especially racial equity, on the map more than 20 years ago. And we only have one job right now. And that job is to be the founders of the nation that is yet to be birthed. The nation that can see our humanity as people of color and work in service of our thriving. That's just not rhetoric. We're in a founding right now. It could be a bad founding or it could be a good founding. Our democracies are living organisms. They're not static. And for too long, we've assumed that we couldn't change the nature and logic of our governing institutions. That's Policy Link's job now. That is the only job. Because it doesn't matter how well our programs and services work if our government is going to continue to undercut all that good work. So that is our job right now. Now, in order to get there, you have to have excellent institutions. So beyond that vision, my job is to create a powerhouse in Policy Link, that it is a premier institution that is as fundamental as our libraries, the Carnegie Institution, the Smithsonian, et cetera. For too long, we've sacrificed our organizations for personal ego among leaders. If Policy Link is not strong, if the Partnership for Southern Equity, if your organizations aren't strong, we can't deliver on all the shit that we talk. And so the reality is we have to create premier institutions where the best and brightest can come and work and make well above a living wage. So what that looked like practically at Policy Link, I'll just give you some numbers so that you can have a sense. Nobody on the leadership team makes below $300,000 a year. The lowest paid person at Policy Link makes $100,000 a year. To me, you can't talk about closing the racial wealth gap if you don't do it in your own organization. And so I could go on and on and on, but you can't talk about Black excellence and then you don't pay for it. And so for me, I want the best to come to Policy Link so that they can be free. I want them worrying about their family. I want their soul in the soul work that we got to do. And so that's what we're creating at Policy Link, a premier place where we can see the humanity of everybody, work in service of everyone's thriving, and that Policy Link will be there for many, many years, well beyond my existence as the CEO.
Okay. So we are meeting at a time where we are in the middle of a complete shift in our U.S. institutions, our democracy, and we are only at the beginning. I think, what are we, even 30 days in? So can you share a bit about how your organizations are meeting this particular moment, how they're going to operate to build a fair, just, and inclusive society with many of the institutions and systems that were meant to do that, even though they were doing that imperfectly, are being completely stripped?
In some ways, this is a good moment. This is a good moment because we always use words that are provocative, but we've never really saw what they meant. In America, in the equity space, we use a word called radical imagination. You're seeing radical imagination on your ass right now. And what it makes me stop and say is, wow, why can't our institutions work that hard for us? For all these years, no, we can't do this. Should we say equity? Should we say race? We scared to say a damn word. And they are transforming institutions, and we're mad about it. That's democracy. So for me, I don't begrudge what they're doing. This is an ass kicking that is earned. It is an ass kicking that is earned because we've been too afraid. You cannot disown your people and then get mad that someone else screws them over. Nobody's owned us. Think about how many rooms you go to and people have to finesse. Should you say equity? Should you say race? Should you talk about class, sexuality, etc.? How do you expect to win if that's how you are? We've been cowardly. Our institutions have been cowardly. They haven't been designed to win. So this destruction for me is quite, it's wonderful and painful at the same time. But here's what I know. You ain't really been doing shit for black and brown people anyway. We're going to be all right. The reality is the FBI, 80% white. See, they don't understand that anti-blackness is getting ready to make their ass wish there was DEI. The Department of Education is 70% white. The federal workforce, 70% white. Black people only 18% of that. So you think you're doing something to us, but yeah, we're gonna be hurt a little bit, but you can't fundamentally hurt us now without taking your whole generations of your own people out. That's the idiocy of racism. So in this moment, I don't fear this moment. We've been prepared for this moment. I actually love sitting in this moment because I want to be able to look white people in the eye and say, now you have nothing to complain about. This is the nation that your granddaddy built, and you need to sit in this shit. You told us to pour all lazy black asses up by our bootstraps. Well, we done that shit. Now let's see what you're gonna do. Can't blame DEI. You can't blame affirmative action anymore. Your ass is bare naked now. And folks, we have to not be afraid to talk to people for real. I can talk to them with this level of contempt for their behavior and still work in service of their thriving. But I want them to understand this is the shit that they created and they got to live with. I'm not trying to clean this up. I'm not trying to defend it. I'm trying to create the new thing. Our legal and regulatory framework was already being weakened. It needs to be remade. This is a moment for us to remake shit. And at the same time, yes, we got to try to hold and protect our communities because there is going to be real suffering. But what I'm inviting you to think about is this. I do not fear white people. I am not afraid of folks coming after PolicyLink. I am not afraid of getting sued. Shit, that's what the business we are in. And if you are afraid to take a punch in the service of liberation, your ass should not be in this job. So for me, I love fighting. This is the moment. This is the moment to fight because you now have an opportunity to do that transformational work that you always done. The question is, do we have a vision to do it? Do we have the courage to do it? And do we have the operational capacity to do it? So I don't really care what they're going to destroy. Imagine now, we've been too afraid to make these organizations weak. Imagine how bold we can be when we recreate the Department of Education. Imagine how bold we can be when we create the FBI, if it's even needed. So what I'm inviting you to think about is, in some ways, this administration is the useful idiot that we needed because of our lack of courage. Because of our lack of courage. And that's really sad to say. And the last thing I'll say is this. Think about this. In a moment of crisis like this, how many folks in here have gotten a call from a funder to say, what you need? I haven't. Most of us haven't. Most of us certainly haven't seen an infusion of cash. So what I'm trying to signal to you is this. If you haven't prepared for this storm, you can go to all the meetings and talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to stand in solidarity. The thing you're going to do is take a good old ass kicking. That's the reality right now because we are not prepared. And that's the shame. That's the shame that those of us who love our people constantly are underfunded and under-resourced, and now you're going to run to us and say, please help us. It's going to cost 20 times what it used to cost. And you should make sure people understand that. Because once again, black and brown people are going to have to save the Americas.
Very good. So one of the advantages that we have in the South is that we know our white folks. We know our white folks down here. And so we were not surprised at all about what happened because we know deep down inside that there has always been a fraction and a part of the power structure that has constantly tried to move us back to chattel slavery, back to a time where we had a permanent underclass, a caste system. We have to remind ourselves that America was primarily built on stolen land and stolen labor. And so that is the goal of this administration, of this worldview, to move us back to a time where the hierarchy of value placed on individuals based on the color of their skin is concrete, and we can't be in a position to change it. And so, as Southerners, we know what we've been up against, and we understand also what it takes to win. You know, one of the key things that is critical for us to do right now is not just assessing. Michael talked about this, who we know or perceive as our enemy, but also look at this as an opportunity to critique and begin to reimagine the institutions that we assumed were for us, but were not really for us in the first place. There are many elements of our community, whether it be philanthropy, whether it be the corporate community, whether it be other factions of our community, that were willing to stand up and say they were for black folks after George Floyd. You know, they were for black folks after Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. But now all of a sudden, because of risk mitigation, right, and I use that in quotes, now all of a sudden they're running for the hills. Well, we have to realize that they were not committed to us in the first place, that it was more about marketing than meaning. And it hurts because many of those individuals and institutions, and I won't mention any names, we thought that they were in right relationship with us. But in actuality, it was all about supply and demand. And that is not necessarily new for us as black folks in America. You know, we talk a lot about 40 acres and the mule, but we were the mule. We were the mule of America and other places around the world. And so the thing that I would really encourage and encourage folks to understand is that in this moment of uncertainty, we have an opportunity to not only reimagine the institutions that are harming us, but also the institutions that we thought were helping us. And we have to be just as critical and courageous at how we're engaging our so-called friends as we are our opposition or our enemies, right? We have to be willing to say to those people who look like us that are working on behalf of other people that we're not going to accept this anymore, and we're not going to allow you to continue to use our communities as a way to accumulate wealth while other people in communities suffering. We have to begin to hold our own. You know, Zora Neale Hurston said all of our skin folks are our kin folks. And we have to understand that just because somebody looks like us doesn't necessarily mean that they're for us. So what are we doing to purge that element? What are we also doing to make sure that, you know, when we're focused and engaged with these foundations, that we're not allowing them to just step away quietly, that we have to be willing to lean forward and start calling some of these institutions out? And not allow them to come back 5 years later and say, okay, well, we understand now, and so we want to come back and support what you're saying. No. Like Michael said, if you want to engage with us, we need 2 or 3 times more support. So we have to begin the process of engaging in ways with our friends that are more focused on holding them accountable and making sure that they're showing up in the way that they put on their marketing materials, that they're actually showing up in a real way to support the work that is required to liberate our communities. But then also, too, I think it's really, really important for us as institutions to not be exclusively dependent upon those institutions to keep us alive. We've got to think about other diverse ways as opposed to having our hand out and funds from private philanthropy on corporations to get things going. I mean, are you thinking about real estate as a way to subsidize your bottom line? Are you thinking about some type of social enterprise to ensure that you're able to engage? Are you thinking about potentially some type of membership structure or individual giving strategy in order for you to keep going? I mean, these are things that are really important for you to consider and think about as we enter into these very, very difficult times. And so we have to step outside of what is comfortable for us as relates to how we usually get resources in order to do the work. And then also, too, I think that there are some things that we have to focus on and move away from in order for us to be successful as well. You know, we talk a great deal about the various gaps in terms of our, you know, the racial wealth gap or all of these other gaps that we through research talk about. But I believe that the biggest challenge that we're facing is the courage gap. You know, it's this, you know, are we willing to give up something and be uncomfortable in order for us to move forward as a community? You know, are we willing to not be liked? Are we willing to not be in a position of comfort in order for us to move forward as a community? And to be completely honest, if you black and you were able to fly here, you are coming from a place of privilege. We all privileged, and I'm talking specifically to the black Americans in this room. We are privileged to us for us to have an opportunity to even be here to have this conversation. But there are folks that we left behind that wouldn't even know where this is. What are we doing to speak for them and to work for them? Because the other gap that a lot of times we don't focus on, and I'll be quiet after this, is that, you know, we focus so much on our proximity to white wealth. We always talk about our proximity to their resources and opportunity, but we don't have enough people talking about the wealth gap that is in our own communities. What is the wealth gap between poor black folks and affluent black folks? You know, that is the work that we have to work on, because if we don't work on that, then we're not going to be positioned to win anyway. Because I believe that what happened in our domestic election was just as much an indictment on our connection as a people and the weakness of our institutions as it was somebody getting more votes than another candidate. So I think that we need to take a deeper breath and really assess where we are as a community and be more intentional about how we work together and who we bringing along in the work that is required for us to get free.
So I'm going to ask one more question for them both, and then I'm going to open it up for questions from the audience. So be sure to sort of start thinking about what you might want to ask these two superstars. So you mentioned organizational capacity, operational capacity of institutions. So do you have any perspectives to share about how we work to strengthen our Black and brown lit institutions, whether it's, especially with the freeze and the philanthropic funding in the moment? So how do we weather this period, and how do we make sure that we are able to thrive and survive, and to make sure that we're meeting the moment and pushing back and protecting our people from the massive cuts that are going to happen, both in sort of social insurance, the layoffs that are already happening, I don't know if you heard this morning, that are likely to decimate the Black middle class. And not, so it's not just about people who are low income right now. I think we're facing a major shift in sort of the opportunity structure of the country, which is already not in good shape.
I'll share a couple things really quick, and then I would love to just talk to you. The first is, it is not about this moment, folks. If we are not the manifestation of love, you can't lead through this moment. If you and I personally cannot take up our role in a way that is different and that is loving, you're not prepared for this moment. If all you're going to end up doing is fighting against them, you will become them. And that is the most worst thing that we do. We see too many people do this. We become the thing that we're fighting. So the first thing is, I would say, we got to work on ourselves. This is why I'm on sabbatical right now. This is the only thing I'm doing. I'm sitting up here right now monitoring my spirit, because it's going into that fight mode, because that's my natural inclination. But the real reality is that if I cannot go back in my role and be the manifestation of love, I will fail. That is not a weak statement. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you actually do have to have a transformational vision for this moment. I don't live in this moment. That's why I said there's going to be pain and suffering. Welcome to the reality. And worrying about it all the time ain't a strategy position for a CEO. My job was to have anticipated this shit before we got here. That's why we sitting on nearly $200 million right now. If I didn't raise another penny, I can get to the end of 2028. You see my point? Yep. So I've removed myself from all these conversations that executives are having about what the hell we're gonna do because it clouds my thinking. My job is not to cry about the world. My job is to go out here and do something about it. That's what I'm paid to do. And so in this moment, there ain't shit I can do about the middle class. I gotta be honest about that. There ain't shit I can do about it. What I can do is continue to stay focused on the long-term agenda that we've created that would rival Project 2025, get it, build it, get it funded, etc. Now, since we have a lot of resources, I should share those resources. So, we share a lot of our resources. If out of a $30 million, let's say, line item for personnel, half of that goes to partners today. There's been at least 4 or 5 organizations who were going out of business that we gave each just $200,000 to stay in business. We're gonna have to do a lot more of that, sharing our resources. And so I gotta be prepared to let some of these resources go to help organizations stay in business. That's what we're gonna have to do for each other, because the bank ain't gonna do it. By the time you wait for a funder, that's a 12-month to 16-month cycle. Folks will be out of business. So those of us who have resources, I was telling someone the other day, tell someone I'm willing to give you some money if they'll match it, to see if we can get them to get off the dime. Those are the things that we got to do. And the last thing I want to do is I need my staff to stay focused on being steady in this storm. Some of our institutions have to show the light forward. That's PolicyLink's job. Other people have other roles. Our job is to stay hopeful and to show that there is another possibility. That's that legal and regulatory framework that I'm talking about. That is going out and raising $1 billion for our sector that Bridgespan is helping us with. So what I'm inviting you to think about is, we're too good at whining and complaining, but we're stronger and better than that shit. Your job as a CEO is to be clear-eyed in this moment. Clear-eyed. And to not be consumed by everything people want to throw at you. I'm not going to meetings. I'm not going to these cross sessions because they will take away from my ability to see clearly how to get to this. More importantly, they're going to make me have a damn heart attack for what? For what? If I'm gonna have a heart attack, it's gonna be over trying to lead some shit that's forward facing. So I'm sharing some of these things with you. And lastly, I will say this. You've got to build an organization that when folks look under the hood, there's a real there. Because you can't ask for the type of money I'm talking about. I mean, your personal credit better be tight. So for example, in this moment, to prepare for this moment, I hired a private investigator to look at the entire leadership team. And I said, it don't need to come to me. It don't need to come to HR. But we need to get our shit ready, because I don't want the institution surprised. You know they're gonna throw a punch. We throwing a punch, they're gonna throw one back. I wanted the team to be ready. So these are the types of things you should start considering. Let your folks know, hey, this is what there's out there on you. Use an app like Delete Me so that you can actually clean up your shit on social media and on the internet for you and your family members. These are things that we're doing right now so that we're ready to go. We have a crisis management firm that has run a whole bunch of scenarios so that I will not be surprised when something happens. But most important, you cannot take us out over my personal behavior or my mismanagement of funds or of people. And if you can manage some of this stuff, you'll find your way through this moment. But there's a whole lot that I can share with you through email around like financial growth models and things like that I'm willing to just share with you if you email me, so that you can see what it looks like to run an org that's going to be ready for prime time and can attract investment. So you just let me know, you email me, and I'll send it to you. After March 15th.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to be somewhat provocative, but also short as well. You know, I think the question that you articulated assumes that all of the institutions that we have should be around. And I'm going to say to you that I don't believe that. I believe that that it is time for us again to begin to interrogate all of the institutions that say that they're for us. Because I think that there are some institutions that are around and they're just taking up space and taking up money. And they're living off their reputation and not necessarily the work that they've done. And also, some of these institutions are in place by people who are not for us, in order to manage our emotions and to manage our ability to organize ourselves towards liberation. And these gatekeeping organizations that we celebrate and honor, but they're not necessarily doing anything to move us forward as a people. And so I think that we need to ask ourselves as institutions and also the institutions that we support, are these institutions playing their part, or am I playing a part, if we're asking our own organizations this question, to move our people forward, or are we actually playing a part in reinforcing the inequities that we're saying that we're fighting against? And I think a lot of times people get caught up in the paycheck. I mean, I believe that's one of the issues why some of our more legacy institutions can't move as quickly as we want them to, because they get so much money from corporations that they can't, that they have to think about the politics associated with speaking out against some of the corporations that are giving them millions and millions of dollars. So I think that as a community, we have to begin to kick the tires and interrogate every organization that says that they're for us. And also, to a certain extent, I think that there's nothing wrong with mergers, right? I think a lot of times people want to do different things, but right down the street, there's another organization doing the exact same thing. You've got to ask yourself, what true value that is different and special that you're bringing to the ecosystem? And if that is the case, keep going. But if not, are there other organizations you can align with or merge with? I mean, we've acquired two national organizations. Both of them are white organizations, right? Because I wanted the organization to be strong, but at the same time, I knew and I see in the field a lot of replication. And so we have to think about, are there ways for us to agglomerate and come together if we're doing the same thing, so we can have a stronger institution and not just 4 or 5 smaller institutions that are working to do the same thing. And I think we need to be more intentional about that as well. And I definitely support what Michael is saying. I mean, you know, we have to do all we can to preserve our hearts at this moment, right? Because a lot of the work that is being done against us right now has nothing to do with public policy. It is about stripping us of our dignity, right? It is about taking us to a place where we don't have hope or believe that change is truly possible. So we have to preserve our work. We have to preserve our heart. And we have to understand that the hard work at this moment is just as important as the hard work, right? The hard work is what we have to focus on as a community right now. And that is being right with ourselves, being in right relationship with others, understanding that real power and change comes from what you're willing to give up and not what you're willing to give alone. And it's also about being willing to, I think we worry too much about what people are going to say about us today. You know, we don't understand that that history is the final judge. And we have to ask ourselves, what will history say about us at this moment? Right? Will it say that we were willing to stand up for future and current generations? Or will they just say that, you know, chicken dinners and checks from corporations were more important to us than the future of our black children? I mean, those are things that we have to ask ourselves, and it's not going to be easy. And again, I think that, when we talk about the black middle class, and of course, I'm from Atlanta, a place that is held as a very important anchor for the African American community. That's only half the story. The other part is that for 20 years, we've been number one for income inequality in the nation. Right. The other part of that story is that while affluent folks go into the Falcons game to watch football, right across the street is one of the top heroin distribution communities in the nation called the Bluff. Right. So when we talk about right relationship, I'm not, and again, I'm trying to be good, Lynette. I'm not trying to go over the top. I'm trying to be good. We need to stop focusing so much on being in right relationship with other folks Well, we need to be focused on, black folks in particular need to be in right relationship with ourselves. Because that is the problem. We need to be, and not just in right relationship with affluent black folks on the north side of town in a particular city and poor black folks on the south side of a particular city. We need to be in right relationship with black folks in Africa. The same way we're in right relationship with black folks in Atlanta. We need to be in right relationship with black folks in Medellin. We need to be in right relationships with black folks in Europe, in the transatlantic. We have to focus on being in right relationship with black folks around the world. Because that is our power and our strength. And if we're not focused on being in right relationship with ourselves, then how in the world are we going to be in a position of power and authority? You know, I got a call today, and I was telling Michael, and this is why my heart is heavy. I get a lot of calls from organizations in the South that are doing important work. And unfortunately, historically, Southern organization and the Southern work has not been funded in the way that other work has been funded around the country. I got a call from a sister who is responsible for organizing and planning the anniversary of the Selma March. And the anniversary, this will be the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. How many of people know what Bloody Sunday is? Raise your hand. And if you don't know, ask the person next to you if you don't know what Bloody Sunday is. I got a call from a dear friend of hers where she is about to really go through a very difficult physical situation because for the first time she can't even raise money hardly to do the event. She can't even raise enough money to do the commemoration of the Selma March and Bloody Sunday. What does that say about the black middle class? What does that say about black folks that she has to depend on corporations to help us celebrate our history? So again, if we're not focusing on supporting the things that matter to us and not expect for foundations and corporations to fund our own freedom and liberation, where we're not doing it ourselves, then how can we really be free if we're dependent on other people to fund it? So we got a lot to do. We got a lot to do.
I'm gonna give you one idea. Some of y'all should act on because it's gonna make you some money. The U.S. is always going abroad trying to act like it is the savior of everybody. Many of our organizations need to be tapping into the international markets now for capital to continue our work. That is what I am beginning to do. There is a whole lot of international money. Some of y'all going to the Skull World Forum instead of just sitting around posting up at that little bar that we all post up at. You need to be thinking about these international organizations and these international investors there who now will see America like we have seen other places and might be willing to invest in our organization. So this is what I mean when I say if you get out of that mode of crying about every damn thing, you will see a whole lot of, it's an abundant world. And our job is to tap into that while we're crying.
Okay. So questions? Yes, I see one back there. Coming to you.
Hi, Maya Rocky Moore Cummings. I'm the author of Rageism, Racism, Ageism, and the Quest for Liberation Democracy. Michael, I wanted you to say, well, two things. First is that you can be clean as a whistle, and they will still make that accusation and then force you to defend yourself in a court of law or with the IRS or whatever. So I'm glad to hear that you actually have a reputation firm, but know that if they want to come after you, they're going to make any accusation, even if it's not based on reality, okay? The second thing I wanted to ask you is in terms of legal strategy. Could you say more? Because I heard you say legal and regulatory. We know that people are now organizing economic boycotts, but I do think that there is a legal strategy to be had here where organizations work together to actually, tap into strategies that focus on equal protection under the law, and even, I would argue, it's time to reclaim reparations just to tie them up, both fiscally and legally.
So Maya, it's good to see you. And you're right. Folks are gonna come, they're gonna come, right? So all we can do is do the best we can to be prepared for that, and then you got to just weather that storm when they do come at you, because we will get attacked. The 64 Civil Rights Act, 65 Voting Rights Act, the 14th Amendment, this is what I meant when I said those things are not static. And too often we got into the legal work because when we were talking to folks who were in that space, they said we cannot do anything for fear of precedent. And that really pissed me off, because I'm like, well, the 64 Civil Rights Act is getting weakened every day. The 14th Amendment needs some modifications. And to sit back and do nothing while the right is always testing the edges and finding openings, to me, is malpractice. So I said, okay, I'm hiring Relman and Koufax and Mofo to help us think about what would be the next generation of civil rights law. To me, the equity law. If I really want to achieve equity and the law is not capable of giving me that right now, I need to start working with those attorneys. So we went out and we got the money to hire those attorneys, and we're working with them now. We're working with a lot of the civil rights groups to say, what is the next legal frame that would allow us to do this work and not have us right back in this place? And that's what I mean when I talk about we haven't been doing the forward-facing work seriously. We haven't been prepared to think about not just defending the 64 Civil Rights Act, but what comes next. Not just thinking that the equal protections in the Constitution is going to stay where it's at, but what would a constitutional amendment look like? You know, the right is preparing for a constitutional amendment. They've been preparing for years, and they're really, really close. And we've not even had the radical imagination to think that we could do that. But folks, we're not going to win if we don't play structurally. Charity is not going to liberate folks. And so what I meant, Maya, is that we want to create the next generation of the 64 Civil Rights Act. The acts are constitutional amendments that would allow our humanity to be seen by government and compel it to behave the way we want it to. And then the last thing I would say is this. We are also developing a legal challenge to outcomes. Our sector, the nonprofit sector, has been afraid to say stop government money if it will, because we've not wanted the spigot to be cut off. My point is, if the government will not improve outcomes for us, shut that shit off. For example, there is a thing called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing at HUD, which says you should be providing decent, safe, and affordable housing for folks. Cities, counties, and states all across America take that money and they turn their nose up at that requirement because they know there will be very little compliance enforced. And so these are the types of things that we're now saying we're going to go after. Often they've been like the third rail. What we're saying is, if government is not producing outcomes, it should not continue to have the luxury of spending dollars, taxpayer dollars, that are not improving the outcomes of Black and brown people. So these are the things that we're wading into now and trying to figure out, and we are a year and a half in of working with Relman and Koufax and Morrison and Forrester.
Thank you. I think that's it.
Hola, buenos días. Yo soy venezolana, soy una artista venezolana y bueno, soy migrante acá de la ciudad de Medellín y también activista acá en la ciudad desde el arte y la integración entre los venezolanos y los colombianos. Entonces, mi pregunta es normalmente, ¿cierto? Bueno, sí, listo, ok. Bueno, normalmente acá en Medellín hay organizaciones que están trabajando por la integración de los venezolanos y también hay organizaciones que han apoyado el proceso para que ciertos venezolanos puedan tener ciertos privilegios. Sin embargo, actualmente con la cooperación internacional, con todo lo que se ha venido dando, dependía mucho de lo que es Estados Unidos. Entonces, estabas conversando sobre el financiamiento internacional, no solo de Estados Unidos. Quería preguntar cómo sería posible que organizaciones creadas por venezolanos, porque estas organizaciones dependen de otra organización que hace como el puente entre esos financiamientos internacionales porque evidentemente los venezolanos no hablamos inglés o no tenemos los documentos legales para poder ejercer y la mayoría de los líderes realmente no tienen cómo pagar arriendo, cómo pagar servicio. Entonces quería preguntarte cómo o qué podrías decirnos a nosotras las organizaciones pequeñas que estamos tratando de luchar por nuestras comunidades. ¿Cómo podríamos conseguir financiamiento directo sin organizaciones intermedias que solo dependan de una organización de Estados Unidos o de un financiamiento de Estados Unidos?
You have that? You guys good with that?
I can start. And so I feel, I see you. I think that's the most important thing that's for me to share with you. And I don't have do you need a translator? Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So the question was really about how can you get resources to smaller organizations in Venezuela because of the challenges with our economy and also larger organizations in Venezuela, if I'm saying this right, that are receiving those dollars, but the frontline organizations, which is a very similar problem that we have in the States, actually, that the frontline organizations don't have a chance to have access to those resources.
How she's a migrant from Venezuela here. I think she was trying to figure out, because of all of the issues between the U.S. and Colombian organizations that were meant to support Venezuelans in this country that are now no longer supporting
Right.
the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
How are smaller organizations that serve the Venezuelan migrant community here trying?
Is that any other parts that we missed? Okay.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, I think she's a migrant from Venezuela here in Colombia. Funding from the United States that used to come here to help organizations that would help them are now, given our situation there, no longer helping her. So she's trying to figure out, how does a person in this country who is not of this country access resources when the intermediaries that acted between the US and them no longer exist or no longer receive funding? How do they access directly those resources when the intermediary is gone?
Yes, stuff, yeah.
So I mean that's really tough. For us, I mean one of the things that I would really think about is, and similar to what Michael was saying, it's important for you to connect with other organizations, in particular potentially organizations in the States that could actually act as an intermediary as well, because you have, so for example, I sit on the board of an organization called the Institute for Sustainable Communities, right? They're a domestic NGO that works around the world to do equity work in different places around the world, right? So there are nonprofit. Hopefully somebody's translating for her. Hopefully they. Okay, good. Hopefully that there are nonprofit NGOs that are out there. The World Resources Institute is another one, WRI, Institute for Sustainable Communities, that are set up to do exactly what you're saying. The key is that they are also getting challenges as relates to getting dollars, because a lot of those resources that they use to support communities like yours actually is also being attacked by the administration, which again for me goes back to this question about, and I think what Michael is trying to share as well, is we also need new institutions. Like we need, but we have to start now to begin to listen to where the challenges are and begin to create either new institutions or strengthen existing institutions that can show up and support you in the way that you need to be supported. And again, as I said before, we're in this challenge and in this particular predicament because we're depending on other people to fund the work that we know is required for the liberation of our people around the world. And so we have to be more intentional about it. Last thing, when Michael and I were, I guess, I don't know, younger, we still young, but younger. There used to be an organization in the U.S. called the Black United Fund. How many folks remember the Black United Fund? And we were just chopping it up last night and just having a conversation about like where did the Black United Fund go? Like that was a community, I guess, foundation where black folks came together and pooled their dollars and actually re-granted to other black organizations that were doing the work that other foundations wouldn't support, right? So is that a part of that new institution that we need to develop where we can have some type of entity that can fund your work in places around the world that is supported by black folks around the world versus us depending on the government or depending on corporations to do the work? So, I mean, what you are dealing with is very, very complicated, but my answer would be reach out to, well, not reach out, but look for those domestic NGOs like the Institute for Sustainable Communities, like the World Resources Institute, because there's a whole group of NGOs that are nonprofits that are not that are in the US that work globally outside of USAID and other groups like that that are doing the work. And there may be an opportunity to actually allow them to help you find resources and re-grant to those communities.
We have time for one last question. Okay, nope. Okay, so we don't? No? Sorry. Okay, well then, it'll be quick. Quick answer, quick question, quick answer.
Hey, thank you. Really appreciate this conversation. Alex Mazza with the Policy Academies as well. My question is, a lot of your focus for today's conversation has been for CEOs and folks who are leading organizations. We work with a lot of younger folks and mid-career folks. What advice do you have right now for folks to be able to enter in this conversation and to work on the visions that you guys have outlined here? What advice would you give to folks in those ages?
It's critical for young people to know how to run organizations. I mean, this is one of the biggest weaknesses in our organization. So the first thing I would say for young folks is you got to decide real quickly, do you want to be a star or do you want to lead an organization? Because too many folks are choosing to be stars and strip mining the organizations. You got to choose. Get your ego out of the shit. The second is the world doesn't work the way you think it does. And ain't nobody got to respond to your ass. So you're only as good as the value that you bring. And you really got to understand that real quickly. Nobody moves because Michael McAfee says shit. People move because I'm in relationship with them. People move because of the value that I bring. Nothing more, nothing less. They don't care about policy link. They don't care about my title. And the sooner we can understand this together, the better. The second is actually to begin to develop a point of view about how you want to lead. Too many of us chase the job title, and then when we get the title, we actually have no vision for what to do. So what I would invite us all to continue to do is to begin to think about what is your leadership voice? More importantly, what is your soul work? Because if you get clear about your soul work, you'll be discerning about the positions that you take. And then the last thing I'll say is this: if you are excellent at doing your job, the money will come. Too many of y'all are asking for money, but you can't bring no real damn value. And ain't nobody gonna tell you that shit. And the last thing I'll say is this: stop asking for a seat at the table when you don't want to pay the price to be at the fucking table. I see too many young folks, they get on a plane twice to go across the country and they tired. I'm on the road literally 70% of the time. So I don't want to hear shit about you want to run the fucking organization with me, because you can't. Because you don't want to pay the price. You don't want to pay the price. There is a price to be paid for these positions. I'm not going to be in balance. There ain't no work-life balance for me. I'm in a fucking crisis. So if I want work-life balance, if I don't want no calls after 5 o'clock, I shouldn't be the CEO. You can't be on my leadership team. Because those people who talk all that shit, they want that paycheck. And that's my job to go get it. So what I'm inviting, and that's not just a young thing, that's an old thing, that's a whole bunch of folks in our sector right now are full of shit. Because they want to cry about this moment, but actually don't want to pay the price for it. So what I'm inviting us all to think about is get really clear about where you want to play, the results you want to achieve, and do you really want to pay that price? Because for right now, I'll give you a practical example. Too many of us in the United States have unionized our nonprofit organizations, and they can't even deliver now. Because they got mad, because they thought they wanted a seat at the table. Now all they've done is create a new level of bureaucracy that ain't gonna deliver shit. Ain't gonna get them more money, ain't gonna get them more time off. Why the hell you want more time off? This is your soul work. You in the middle of a crisis, I don't want more time off. So what I'm inviting you to think about is, some of y'all need to be clear about where you go work, because if you come to my place talking that shit, you're gonna run into this buzzsaw. Because PolicyLink is not a place for you to come and take. It is a place for you to come and do your soul work. And my job is to create the conditions for you to be free to do that. But we are not going to be a country club. You're getting paid $300,000, but you're gonna do more than $300,000 worth of work. Otherwise, you can't be there. And so what I'm inviting us all to think about in this moment is to stop trying to just, it's like in the 90s when folks would wear the medallions. That don't mean you down. Being down means you are moving some results. And the way I measure myself and keep score is by the results that I'm achieving. When I lie in my bed at night, I'm asking myself, what the hell did I really accomplish for people? That is the only thing that matters. And if you can't do that, shut your ass up. Because you are not ready to be in this moment. And I really mean this, folks, because it is killing our organizations. Our equity organization colleagues in the States are fighting amongst themselves because we think we're so arrogant. You ain't black enough. You ain't this enough. You ain't straight enough. You ain't gay enough. You ain't this enough. We're not ready for this moment because we're arrogant. We're arrogant and we're soft, and ain't nobody telling us that shit. You can't fight Trump and them because you're soft. You can't even take a blow without crying and cowering. So whether you're young, old, or close to the grave, what I would tell you is this. Find your soul work, because you will then be indomitable. You will not tire. You will not cower. You will do the thing in the moment that is required to make sure that our people have a chance of being liberated. That's what I would say.
And on that note, we'll wrap it up. There's, I think, nothing better that could be said there. Thank you all for